Hi friends, in our previous sessions we have completed the creation of Docker file for PHP and Nginx. We have also created the virtual host, so configurations files for the Nginx and the configurations files for the PHP. Now in this session we'll create first the Docker compose file for PHP and Nginx, and then using that Docker compose file we will build the PHP and Nginx, and then we'll make the PHP and Nginx up and running. After making it up and running, we'll see this each line within the container, so that it will be more and more clear to you that how everything will work in practice or practically. So let's start with it. So first we'll create our PHP Nginx YML file in the deployment directory. Okay, we'll take reference for our rehearsal copy. So I think this is quite clear to you. First we'll define the version of Docker Compose, and we'll define our services. Over here we'll use two services. One is PHP and one is Nginx. So let's start with it. Okay, so let's take a quick look into this file. So we have two services. One is PHP and one is Nginx. This is the name of our image and this is the name of our container. Now in this particular case, during the build I have passed arguments like an environment. So it is not used currently, but whenever I pass these arguments, you can fetch it in the Docker file. You can use it in the Docker file. We didn't use it. This is just for passed for understanding purpose, right? This is context which is clear to you. Our context will always start from the base directory, and this is the path of the Docker file which starts from the base directory, which means deployment Docker, PHP Nginx, PHP, and the Docker file. And this is the volumes mounted within the container, right? So if we now take a look into the Docker file, we have set our work directory for PHP is web practice, and it is within the container, and our code is outside the container. So we did the volumes mount, which means we have mounted our code from outside to inside the container. We will see it practically soon, right? Similarly, in the Nginx, we have passed two arguments, version and environment, and we have used the version, right? So we have used the version over here, and we have also get the environment. So when you define like arg in this way, you can have the values from here, right? Context is clear, and this is the ports that we have exposed for the Nginx, which is the 8080. And this is similarly we have mounted the code in the Nginx as well. Basically Nginx doesn't need to execute the code for PHP, but mainly we will serve the static files like CSS, JS, images from the Nginx, and hence we need to have the copy of our code in the Nginx container as well. I'll show you everything practically, so just don't worry. Then I have put the depends on PHP. What does this mean? That this Nginx will only start to build once the PHP image build will complete. And why? So if you remember this line in the Nginx Docker file, we are copying the code from PHP image to Nginx container, which means that PHP image should be built and ready before Nginx build process will start. So over here we have provided the dependency so that the Nginx container is depends on the PHP container. If you remember that we have discussed during the restart policy as well, when we discussed the mysql.yml. Over here we have given the restart policy. So restart policy will Also taken care this depends on when it automatically restarts the container. It will first restart the PHP and then it will next restart the Nginx, right? So this is all about our compose file. Now we'll start building our applications. So let's start with it. So we'll perform this command. So it will take a while because our build process is now starting. Okay, so our build is now completed. As you can see that first it has created the completions of PHP and then the Nginx build will complete, right? Now we can make our application up using the up command. So let's make our application up. I will make our application up in the foreground so that we can see all the. Okay, so as you can see that our Nginx is running now, as well as our PHP is also running, right? Now let's see that our containers and images are ready. So if we list our images, you can see over here the two images, namely practice underscore nginx and practice underscore php, right? So we have created the two images that you can see over here, our two images, practice underscore php and practice underscore nginx. Then we will see our docker process is running, right? As you can see that our practice underscore nginx and practice underscore php image is running over here, and this is the name of the container, and our nginx is running on port 80 and our PHP APM is running on port 9001, right? So this is like our nginx and PHP is ready now. Okay, then let's see, or let's move further. Okay, so now we will go inside the container and see that what it contains actually. So we'll use docker exec command to go inside the container. If you remember that we have discussed about docker exec command in the fundamental, so we can use our current user id. So if I check my id, which is 1000, right? So I will use the 1000 over here. So docker exec minus u 1000 colon, my group is also 1000. So I have used user id, user group minus ig, and name of my container is, let's say, practice underscore php, right? And I will use the console. Okay, so as you can see that I am directly moved to web practice, which is my work directory, right? So now let's try to refer our file one more time. This is my work directory, right? So this is the web practice. So whenever I go inside the container, I can see that my current directory is web practice, which I have written over here, right? Then what it should contain, it should contain this PHP and Nginx code. So if I'll do this, right, you can see that I have copied the code from outside the container to within the container. So as you can see using this copy command, and now you can see the code which is present within the container, right? Also you can see all these file, like if you just do like ls minus l, or we can just do the cat you can see this our file, right? This file, this default.ini, right, that we have created um, over here, right? And then we have copied it inside the container, right, in these locations, right? Similarly, you can see all the files, right, that we have copied from outside container to within the container, right? So now I think this is more clear to you. And this startup file will be called when I executed the up command, right? So when I perform this up command, it will execute this startup file, and in that startup file I have run the PHP FPM. As you can see, I have run the PHP FPM in the foreground. So over here you can see that the PHP FPM is up and running, and it is ready to handle the connection. So now I think it is much more clear that what this Docker files is actually doing, right? Similarly, we try to understand the Nginx Docker files, right? So if you now take a look into the Nginx Docker file, it is very similar. So let's exit from this container and we'll try to go inside the Nginx container, right? Okay, we didn't set any working directory in the Nginx, so it won't directly provide you the web practice like a PHP, but we can always go and see that our code is also present within the Nginx, because we have copied our code from PHP image to Nginx container or within the Nginx image. In the similar way, we have copied our conf files in this directory. So if I go into the cd etc nginx conf.d, I can see that I have all my conf file presents over here, right? I copied these files from outside to within the container, right? So I think we have made our applications up and running using the PHP and Nginx. Now, yes, you can see that our URL is looks like this, right? Where it is, yes. So if I open my virtual host, my URL is dev.practice.star. Now I need to do the host entry. So let's open our host file. And I need a sudo permission for that. So I'll do is that, okay, okay. So if I take a look into my host file, okay, I have already made an entry for our practice. So that is 127.0.0.1, and then that is dev.practice.1.com, right? Now you can give any name. I have just given the 1.com just for understanding purpose. Over here I have given star, so I can use anything like dev.practice. So let's try to run this dev.practice.1.om, and we will use the HTTP protocol, as I have left HTTPS for you for the exercise. Okay, so as you can see that our application is up and running, right? Because we have just printed the PHP info, right? Now this is interesting to understand the concept of mount. So what this mount will do, right? Now if you take a look into the volumes, we have mount this directory which is outside the container to within the container, right? So whenever you modified this file, it have impact within the container even if you modify it with outside the container. So if I go into the PHP container now, and if I take a look, go into the public directory, if I get index.php, right, it has only this many informations. Now if I want to put, I want to modify it like echo how are you, right? So now if you can just put the cat over here, you can see that the how are you is present within the container as well. Why? because we did the volume mount. If we don't do this mount, right, and if I will modify anything outside the container, it doesn't have impact within the container. So we need to do this volume mount, and this is only needed in the development environment. It doesn't needed in the test and production environment, because in test and production environment we don't need to modify the code, because once the code is copied, we'll just run that code, right? So I think this volumes is now quite clear to you, right? And now if I just refresh this, right? Okay, I think there should be some issue. Let me check. Okay, there is no semicolon, so let's refresh it. Okay, so you can see the how are you over here, right? So now we are done with our Nginx, PHP, and MySQL, right? So this is all about running the applications using PHP, MySQL, and Nginx using the Docker. So that is all about this session. We'll continue further in the next session.